they're showing it in the, they look at Lincoln with it. They're showing it on the screen. It's whatever today's guest, whoever today's guest is. Archaeology in treasure.
Okay. So Jill, if you see something that says you're being live streamed, got it, just go ahead.
I did.
Push got it and that'll go away.
Okay, I did it.
Okay. And then I'm going to record and it'll tell you it's being recorded.
Got it.
Okay, so I will tell Ann and Kathy, if you want to ask Jill a question, please go up to the laptop and you'll have to unmute yourself to do that. We can hear you really well, but not when you're muted. And we're going to give our Facebook people another minute to find us.
So you're all set. She's on the video with the guest speaker. What can we help you with?
I was just gonna say thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I hear the sirens in Little Rock, which means it's noon. And
On Wednesday.
on Wednesdays, yes, we have Jill Jones here as our guest speaker for our first guest speaker series program. Oh, we've got Janet coming in. And this is for the LifeQuest spring term. So we have a couple of folks sitting in, and we may have more as the weeks go by in room 6263 at Second Presbyterian Church. If you took a class and you wanted to stick around for the guest speaker hour, this is a great place to do that. You can have your lunch. Or if you're joining us online, hi Janet, I'm glad that you're with us on Zoom. You may do that, or you can join us on our public LifeQuest of Arkansas Facebook page. So we are spinning plates like crazy here. Jill's program and all of our guest speaker programs will be on our public Facebook page and then archived on our YouTube channel, which is a part of our LifeQuest library. And so you can access it after there in that place after today. But I wanted to say a special welcome to Jill for being first this spring. Jill is I'm going to read a little bit. You can tell she's a journalist by education and a professional writer by trade with a career spanning more than 4 decades. She's written to a wide range of audience and media, print, audio, video. She's going to tell us about some of her books and mostly we've kind of gone back and forth, Jill, haven't we, about what you were going to focus on, archaeology, which is a recent project. And I do want you to touch on that. But I think what she was interested in doing most is helping answer a question that comes to her most frequently, which is, where do you get your ideas for writing? How do you come up with all these ideas? And I'm really curious about that because you've written on such a wide range of topics. And so how do you even choose? I'll start with that. But welcome, Jill, and tell us more about yourself and let me know when you want me to share your PowerPoint today.
Okay, sure, will do. Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me to come today, and especially Ann West, my friend and neighbor. It's all your fault, Ann. I'm a relatively newcomer to Little Rock. I moved here at the end of 2018. I live in the downtown neighborhood of the Governor's Mansion. I do not live in a mansion. And I'm just, I guess, a curious person. I like to listen. I like to hear people's stories. I actually studied to write fiction at the University of Oklahoma. And I didn't know that I would get to actually ever be a published writer in a fictional way, but it turned out that way. For the first part of my career, I wrote what I call the ultimate fiction, which is advertising. I had a long career, I guess you'd say, in that field. But I had a friend who had a hot new Corvette, and we lived in Houston. And she wanted me to go with her to a writers conference in Dallas in that hot Corvette. And I did. And it was a romance writers conference. And she was a big romance reader. I was not. But I walked into this room in the hotel, and there were like 800 women writers. And it was an amazing event. And I realized that romance was a field that women could actually probably get published in. So I became a romance writer right then on the spot. The problem with me was I don't do genre fiction very well, whether it be romance or sci-fi or whatever. I can't write the same story over and over, just changing the characters, which is basically what genre fiction is. So I became a romance author, and I didn't write the same story all the time, which is good and bad. It satisfied me. It did not make me Nora Roberts. So it's a field that is now very popular. It's one of the most popular fields of publishing that there is. But my sojourn into romance writing started in a very weird way. And I'm going to make the story a little short, but I was living in Sarasota, Florida, and I was dabbling in, I won't say the occult, but I was dabbling in ideas that were outside what people in our country consider normal. And I had gone to a conference about past life regression. And of course, I bought the tape, and I had tried my hand at self-hypnotizing myself to see if I could find a past life, something, if I could do it. And I did it for several times and nothing happened. And one afternoon, I decided I'd try one more time. And I said to myself, said I, show me a past life that will affect or has an effect on my life as a writer. And it did. I had a vision that was pretty amazing. It was visual. There were a woman in a very old homespun looking dress, and a man in a rough jacket, and they were standing on a hillside. It was windy and the grasses were blowing, and his back was to me, and I couldn't see her face. She had on a white dress, but I got the impression that they were not supposed to be together, that they were forbidden lovers. And then the screen in my brain went black, and the words Emily Bronte came to my mind, and it even had the umlaut over the E in her last name. And then that disappeared, and the word poetry came up like white on black. And then it all disappeared, and I woke up. I had never read Wuthering Heights. I'd never read Jane Eyre. I didn't know anything about the Bronte family. And I grabbed my car keys. It was back in the day when you still had to go to the library to get the stuff. And I went to the library, and I came home with a stack of books about the Bronte family. And it was fascinating. And that's where my first book, Emily's Secret, came from. You can show that slide now if you want. Hello? Anyway, it won a prize with the Georgia Romance Writers, which is one of the big groups in the organization. And it started my career. What it really did is it got me really into historical aspects of fiction, finding a subject that fascinated me, but taking a look at it through modern eyes. So Emily's Secret is a diary book, and it was published in 1995. So it's a really oldie, but Wuthering Heights is too. So it's one that's, I kind of think it's timeless, but it's got a modern day hero and heroine who are the romance part of it. And then it's got the diary of Emily Bronte. And I have run this by the crazy people that are in the Bronte Society, totally obsessed people about the Brontes. And they had one change to make, and that was I had made mention of a hawk named Hero that Emily captured on the moor. at a time he was dead. There it is. Okay, let me tell you, this is not the original cover. This is the cover that when I had them republished as ebooks, that's the cover they came up with. So there's the moors, there's the high grass in the field where I saw the image. So anyway, that got me started, and kind of set me on a path of my career to write historical stories based on history, but that were seen through modern eyes. Now, they say all stories have been written. They're either in the Bible or William Shakespeare. And that's probably true because it's all about basic human drama. Emily's Secret is about a forbidden love affair. I'm sure those stories are everywhere. But I like to try it in a different way and entertaining, but also I think people learn from my books. I love to consider the what ifs. In this case, what if Emily Bronte had a model for Heathcliff? I mean, she and her sisters and brother lived high on the mountain, on the Yorkshire moors. They were the children of a very eccentric father who was a minister, and they had no social life. Where did she come up with this alpha male, this Heathcliff person? You can go ahead and take that off now if you'd like. What if there really was a model for Heathcliff? And that is Emily's Secret. Then my editor at St. Martin's Press said, well, you need to write another story, but make it about another writer, somebody that's famous. So who could I come up with that would be better and more colorful than Lord Byron? And so the second book was about Lord Byron and his love affair with his crazy girlfriend, Caroline Lamb, and she's a ghost. So I'd like to make it, and this is good. The good part about romance, you can get away with doing stuff like this. Make it fanciful. You can tell a ghost story. The third book is a time travel, and it's about Mary, Queen of Scots, and it's also about the rescue of the Scottish regalia from Oliver Cromwell's men in Scotland. Now, I'd like to stop here and say, I have been to all the places that I've written about, because I don't think you can write authentically unless you have seen it with your own eyes, tasted the food, smelled the air, etc. And so I've had some really great adventures doing this. It's been quite fun. And the reason I have a lot of my early books were set in England and Scotland is because I like to go there, and I got to do that. And I traveled, and I had lots of adventures I can't even share because it'd take me all afternoon. So at the end of I had 11 books of romance and suspense. I kind of evolved a little bit away from the romance so much into suspense, but I also came back across the pond and set some of my last books on American soil. Well, if you don't write the same story over and over, it's hard to make a living. And so I took a part-time job I lived in North Carolina in a little town called Black Mountain, just right outside of Asheville. And I was the director of a very small local history museum, which was great fun. Didn't pay much, but it was a good job. And then in 2001. And then in 2006, I took a full-time job with the Blue Ridge National Heritage Area, which is a public-private partnership between the National Park Service and the Heritage Area Program. I was their communications director, and I traveled through the 25 counties of Western North Carolina, and I got to meet some of the most remarkable people, and they were very independent, a lot of Scotch-Irish people, and don't tell me I don't want any zoning, and but the thing is, I wonder, why did anybody move here? You can't farm very easily. There's hardly any land that doesn't slope. What were these people running from? The ones that immigrated from England and Scotland and Germany and all those places. And just because there's a lot of them. And they brought with them their music, their crafts, their agricultural traditions. And so that was part of my job, was to promote those things. But as I went through the next 10 years, I just kept thinking this idea, why? why did they move here? What were they running from? What were they running to? And that's when I retired in 2016. I wrote this trilogy that's out now called Freedom's Edge. And it started out as a saga. It was a what if, why? It was more why than what if. Why did these people come here? Who were they? What did they face? What did they, thank you. Yeah, you can go ahead and put that's the one about Mary Queen of Scots there. This is the trilogy that it's just now published. It's the three books, Escaping Yesterday, Surviving the Now, and Fighting for Tomorrow. It covers the years from 1750 to the end of the Revolutionary War in 1782. And it tells the story of the Revolutionary, well, it tells more than just the Revolutionary War, but it tells from the point of view of a Southern woman. So that's different. You don't hear much about the Revolutionary War being fought in the South, but in truth, it was in North Carolina that actually two of the last battles were fought. And one was the Battle of Kings Mountain, and that's in the Fighting for Tomorrow. But going back to the first one, what I have here is fictional people, characters in my book. They're fictional, but I'm getting distracted here. The historical parts, the historical people in the books are very accurate. The books have been vetted by the North Carolina archivist, state archivist, and they tell a true story, but it's through the eyes of the young immigrant girl, Fiona Cassidy, who comes from Northern Ireland in an indentured servant capacity, and from a young man, Will Gordon, who miraculously survives the Battle of Culloden, which was a real butchery. And she comes into Charleston, and he comes into Wilmington. And they have separate books, partially separate books. The first book, Escaping Yesterday, is Fiona's story. And the second book starts with Will's story. And then they come together, and then their family and how they survive during a very tumultuous time. And then the third book is their children, and especially the son, the oldest son, who's a bright redhead, and he's born into a Cherokee situation, and they call him Firehead, which I just love. Anyway, Firehead is the one who is most involved in the revolutionary efforts in the whole war. But it's also about culture clash. It's about there's let's see, immigration. There's domestic violence. There's rape. There's cultural clash between like the Native Americans and the settlers, and then there's the clash between the Patriots and the British. And it was a big fat mess. The whole situation, because sometimes the Indians they were kind of mercenary, and they didn't want the white people coming in across their land, of course, but also they hired out to George Washington, and it's just a whole lot of stuff I had no idea about. So now I do. And if you read these books, I think you will learn a lot, like I did, about things that I just didn't know. So how do I get my ideas? From history, and some of them just from a past life regression. It's hard to believe, but it's true. And it just getting stories like the one about Mary Queen of Scots. I went to Edinburgh in search of an idea, because they wanted a third book about a third British writer. Well, I didn't find very interesting British writers in Scotland. I mean, it was Sir Walter Scott and Rob Roy, and that was about it. And so I went to the castle, and in the castle, up the spiral stairs, there was a wax tableau with Sir Walter Scott and his granddaughter discovering the Honors of Scotland that had been tucked away in a big old trunk for a century. And then that led me to the story, the history of the regalia, how they were saved from Oliver Cromwell. And then I threw in the fictional part about Mary Queen of Scots. And it was great fun. So it's hard to say where the ideas come from. My editor wanted me to write a book about perfume. I didn't know anything about perfume. I don't wear it. I don't particularly like it. But I investigated the history of perfume making, and it took me to France, to Grasse, and I learned a whole lot about that. And of course, my perfume was magical because it was a romance. And that's kind of how that idea got started, because she told me, why don't you write a book about perfume? Well, it's hard to write a book that somebody tells you what to write, but she did and I did, and it turned out to be quite successful. And I don't know how much time I have spent yakking on here. Am I doing okay, Leah?
Yes, you're doing fine. Anytime you want to open up for questions, it's up to you. And I can take this down so we can see you better.
Okay, I think it'd be a good time to open it up for questions. I mean, this is a broad overview. Some people say, what are you writing next? And I don't know. I have no idea, or if I am, because I'm retired and I'm enjoying that too. So ask away if you would like.
Okay, Janet has a question. Go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I had a question on your research. How long? I mean, I imagine each book might be different, but is there a favorite place or places you go for the historical research? And then also, how long are you into the research before your book is finally completed?
That's a good question. The romances took me about a year to write each one. The big saga is a 2-year project, or at least over 2 years. Where I went for research on the early books was the library, and that entailed, a ton of work. And I have to say, I'm a big supporter of Wikipedia now because it helps me get to things that I need to know very fast, and I don't have to get my car keys and go to the library. I do use the library a lot, but not for that. But the thing is, online, for instance, I found for the trilogy, I was looking up a certain time, a certain date, 1752 in Charleston. And I went from Wikipedia to, it recommended, or it had a reference to a piece of, like a historical pamphlet, like the Historical Society would have put out. And I read about a big hurricane that happened on September 2nd of 1752. And I needed that hurricane, and it helped drive the plot of the book. It was one of those wonderful surprises that, really? It's that day? Yeah, it was that day. So I use the internet a lot. I realize that Wikipedia is not always 100% accurate. I also use other sources, and a lot of historical, like I said, pamphlets and things like that. It took me, I think I said, 2 years to do this book. And we traveled to all the places in the book. Of course, North Carolina, South Carolina, it's not very hard to go there. But there's one area which is almost to Tennessee. Actually, it might be in Tennessee. Sycamore Shoals, it is in Tennessee, very far east Tennessee. And that's where the group mustered the ragtag band of farmers and all who marched to South Carolina and defeated the British. It's a great story. So we went there, and it's called Sycamore Shoals for a reason, right? It's a shoals. Well, we got all excited about the visitor center and this and that. Then we went to lunch, and we never did look at the shoals. We had to go back and see the shoals, because you want to see where these people did these things. Very, very, just very interesting. Some of the mountains they had to go over, and all Roan Mountain. It amazes me they could even do it. But you know what? The British major that they killed, I just did a spoiler, didn't I? He did a bad thing. He wrote him a letter, and he said, I'm going to come across those mountains, and I'm going to burn your farms and kill your livestock. I don't think he said anything about the women, but you can imagine. And all it did was make these Scots, Irish, basically people furious. And they said, we're not going to wait for you. We're going to go get you. And they did. And that's a true story. And Kings Mountain is the end of it. Did that answer your question, my friend?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
And if you have a question, just hop up there to the laptop and unmute. Ann West.
Come on, Ann, you got to ask a question.
Did any of those places that you travel to feel like home? I'm getting this on Facebook.
Oh, that's a great question. Actually, the Yorkshire Moors
On Thursdays.
did. And one of the days that I was there, I hiked up to what they think was the prototype for Wuthering Heights, and it was high on the mountain. I was with a friend of mine who was one of those really obsessive Bronte Society members. And I stopped and I got goosebumps because there was the spot. I looked down the hill and there was the spot. This is where my little vision happened. And it was just amazing. Now, do I think I was Emily Bronte in a former life? No, I do not. I think that I asked the question, what historical, what kind of former life influenced my writing? And it certainly did. So that it's a different thing. There's all kinds of people think they were Emily Bronte. I'm not one of them. I went to the Bronte museum, which is in the house where they live, and there was the sofa on which she died. And then the docent told me, she said, "Oh, you wouldn't believe how many people think they were her." So, I'm not one of them. But anyway, that's whatever feels like home. That would be the closest one. You have any other questions?
Okay. I think Ann was ready to ask one.
Dan, I am so glad I came to the talk because there's so much I didn't know about you, Jill. I've got lots of questions now, but one is, what is the title of the book about perfume? I would love to read that one.
Okay. The St. Martin's Press named it Essence of My Desire, which I hated, but it's very much a sexy book. It's the sexiest book I ever wrote. Essence of My Desire. When I redid them, I got my rights back and I resold them to Diversion Books, which does all the ebooks, and I renamed it A Scent of Magic. And that's what it's called. And I like that much better. I don't know why they do that, change that name, but I guess it sounded sexier. I don't know. And you know, and a thing about your cover art, when you write for a big publisher, they choose the art, they choose the cover design, they choose the color. And on Essence of My Desire, I'm sure it was a guy who drew the picture. It looked like a spaceship. It was supposed to be a crystal decanter, very romantic, and it was angular, and then they had a die cut in there. So you open the book, and where they had cut out this piece, they cut out part of the image that was on the inside of the cover. It was kind of a mess.
Well, let me ask you a second question. I had no idea about the past life progression that you did. Do you still do past life progression sessions, or?
No, that was a onesie. I was just experimenting to see if I could get it to work. Dr. Brian Weiss is the man that was the speaker at the conference I went to. He was a psychologist or psychiatrist from Mount Sinai, and he regressed one of his patients, and she went back into he hypnotized her, and then she went back into a very realistic past life, and so he really became a big believer, and that's where I got my ideas. But no, I don't do that. It just was I like fantasy. I like things that are magic and whimsical and that sort of thing. And that seemed like it's fit the bill.
Thank you.
I see it kind of meditative in a way for you to quote, go into your past life regression. It's you ask a question and then it to me, again, I see it as a meditation type thing.
Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. You're in a meditative state. And usually I just saw, in my mind's eye, I just saw colors whirling around and I didn't see any images until this one happened. It was quite a remarkable experience and it was real and it affected my life as a writer. So what can I say? I'm a weirdo.
I have a question. This is Kathy. Do you think it's easier or more fun to do a series of related books or a standalone?
Oh, well, the reason I did a series on this one, it was a standalone and it was really long. And trying to get a publisher interested in a book that's 560 pages is almost impossible these days. People have a shorter attention span. They don't read as much as they used to. Some people don't, I do. But I was just frustrated. I couldn't get past that. And so I tried cutting it back and it just ruined the story. And my husband said, why don't you make it a trilogy? See if you can divide it into 3. And I did, and it worked just great. Now, my friend who lives in Savannah, who ordered all 3 of them and read them, and she's a big fan of mine, she said, why did you make me buy 3 books? You could have just done it in one. I said, yeah, and it would have cost you the same amount of money and been a lot heavier to hold. So these books, I am very pleased. I did them myself through a company called Ingram, which is an old line distribution company of books. And because the publishing industry has shrunk so much that they don't buy from authors like they used to. Ingram got smart and they started something called Ingram Spark, which is a self-publishing arm of the distribution company. And the problem with the self-publishing is getting the books out there. How are you going to get them to booksellers and online and this, that, and the other? Well, they just take care of that. And it was very affordable. And I have a really great friend who's a graphic artist in Asheville, and he designed the covers, and they're just spot on for the books. I could not be happier with how this has turned out. Now, where to buy them? Leah Lent, my lovely lady over at Wordsworth, carries them. Of course, you can get them on Amazon. You can get them on the Barnes & Noble website. And there's another one called Indigo or something like independent books. I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I'd like to invite y'all to check out my website. I'm sure that's what everybody says, but it's jilljonesbooks.com, all one word, no caps, jilljonesbooks.com. And on there, you will see a synopsis of each of the early books, plus a synopsis of each of the three in the saga, the trilogy. Now, I had to publish each book independently, even though it's a trilogy. The trilogy is called Freedom's Edge. The books themselves are called, have separate titles, and they have separate ISBN numbers, so you can buy one at a time. They're not sold as a set. Escaping Yesterday is, can you put that back up? Or maybe I'll just do this. When I said that my travels throughout Western North Carolina I encountered the crafts and the music. Well, this is the heroine, and a fiddle follows her along the way of her life. This ship down here, she comes on a ship, and it is supposed to go straight to Charleston, but when they get to Liverpool, the ship's owner sends the captain on another errand, and they go to West Africa and pick up a boatload of slaves. So I've tried to bring in the slavery issue. I used to live on a sailboat, so I know what it's like to have a storm. And I threw that boat right into a hurricane. I had a baby born on it. It's a little over the top, but it was fun. And anyway, I don't know how I got off on all that, but the escaping yesterday is about the heroine whose name is Fiona Cassidy. Surviving the Now is about Will Gordon, starts out with Will Gordon and how they get together. Will has his own horror stories. I mean, this is not a happy book. It's a real book, and there's some fun things in it, but there's some things that are, people say, well, I didn't get any laughs out of that. Well, no, you won't. It wasn't a happy time in history, but these are the people that made our country. This is where part of where our America came from. It wasn't the Boston Tea Party and, Midnight Ride, Paul Revere, and all those places up north you hear about. This took place in the South. And, the Tories were rife in the South. That's who the British thought would be on their side, and they were. And it was neighbor against neighbor, Civil War. It was neighbor against native. I tried to portray especially the Cherokee, because that's who lived in that area. And I worked with the Cherokee, and I tried to give insight into what those people were like. They were all savages. They just had a different cultural take on things like murder.
I think Kathy has a question. Is that right? Kathy, you look like you're standing up.
I have been, yeah. The other question you mentioned, so what are you working on now?
Yeah, I was afraid of that.
I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat the question, Jill?
She said, what am I working on now?
Oh, okay.
And I
Thank
said,
you.
I was afraid of that. I don't have a plan. And sometimes things just come to me and I say, oh, I got to do that. I've written a couple of short stories, one about a murder that took place in Florida. And the reason I wrote it is because I have a friend who lives 1 block away from where all that took place, and he wanted a story about it. I haven't published it or anything. I just wrote it because it was fun. Being a retired person, I've got other interests. I love to garden, and I love to travel, and I love to eat. So I don't have a plan to write something. However, I'm a writer. That's what I do. And when I get an inspiration, maybe it's a past life thing, I don't know. When I get an inspiration, I may write a book about it. And then it'll happen. It just happens. And things just come to me, and I just capture them on paper. And I live in this really wonderful neighborhood. Ann West is one of my neighbors. It's full of very intelligent and sometimes very quirky people. And I'm thinking it would be a great neighborhood to put a murder mystery in. And
Ooh, perfect. Well, can we commission that?
Along those lines?
Yeah, can we commission that? Well, but between your writing and traveling and eating, we want you to come to LifeQuest and join us, because you could really enrich our membership and our curriculum like you've done today. We'd love to have you with us.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
Oh, so glad. If there's not any other questions, our Facebook group is being very quiet despite my badgering. So we're gonna just leave it to the Zoomers and the folks at LifeQuest in the room to ask questions. But we really appreciate everybody for chiming in 3 different ways, and to have Jill with us today. And I'm so glad you made your way to Little Rock.
That's a whole story unto itself. I was born in Tulsa. I've got a degree from OU, Oklahoma. And I've lived my life as sort of a vagabond. I've lived all over Texas because my dad was in oil exploration. Louisiana. I married a Texas boy who was a sailor, and we lived on our boat for a couple of years with a dog and a kid. That was interesting. And then we moved to Florida, and then I moved to North Carolina, stayed there 24 years. That's the longest I've ever been anywhere. We have friends who had moved from Fort Lauderdale to Little Rock, and we kept going coming here to say, like Thanksgiving with them, and they kept saying, you just need to come to this town. It's really great. Well, being from Tulsa and him from Longview, Texas, we just had no inclination to move back this direction. But we're getting a little older, and we lived on a mountain that was very slippery. When it rained on the leaves in the fall, or when it snowed, and the house we had was lovely, but it was a constant maintenance. And the price of real estate just went through the roof. And we said, we probably ought to sell this house at this time before it kills us, because we were really trying to keep it up, and it was all wood, and it was a big chore. So one day we were with these friends, and they had come to see us and sit on their porch of their VRBO and drink a little wine. And we said, we think we want to sell our house, but we don't know where to go. And they've been after us to look at Little Rock. So anyway, they had a house. They have a lot of properties, and they had a house that was, it's a duplex. It was for sale. Or they wanted to sell it. It wasn't for sale. And that's how we got here. And you know what? This has been the best move of my life. I love Little Rock. It's just amazing. I had no idea. And of course, I think I've landed in a great neighborhood. And I have.
You have, but talk about upkeep. You're in a historic neighborhood, so you're probably in a historic home. But
It's true, but it's a much smaller one, and our friends had already restored it. So,
oh, that's good. Well, we're glad that you're happy in Little Rock, and I meant it when I said come to LifeQuest. Well, people here, and I think you would be thrilled to be here, and we would be thrilled to have you. You'd fit right in.
well, thank you.
So I think we're out of time today, but we've had a brief but really great introduction to you and your writing, your work, a little taste of that, and how your mind works. So it's whetted our appetite to learn more, and so we'd like to invite you back and hope that you will join us again in another class or as a member. All right, everybody, thank you today for being here.
Very much.
And to have Jill with us. And we'll see you next time. Next week on our guest speaker series, we have Eliza Bornay, who is with CAL, Central Arkansas Library System, one of the best assets of our city. And she's going to be talking to us, I know, right? Speaking of books, and she's going to be talking to us about some of the upcoming free programs that LifeQuest members would definitely be interested in, including their annual book sale. So come back on this channel next week at noon, and Jill, join us. Same link for you. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. We'll see y'all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.